Hello. My name is Genevieve Devlin, former investigator, sister to a police captain, and the woman they tried to erase. Last week, I walked into a police station thinking I was answering a letter. Instead, I walked straight into a trap built by my own blood. They thought they'd bury me quietly. They forgot I've been trained to dig up the dead. The sun hadn't even burned through the haze when I stepped out for the mail. The air felt thick enough to drink, Louisiana heat pressing against my chest. The cicadas were already screaming from the trees, that endless hum that always made me think of arguments that never end. My hand brushed through the pile of envelopes until I saw it, the one with the Baton Rouge Police Department seal stamped in dark blue. I froze. A sold seal. My sister. The envelope felt heavier than paper should. I could already imagine her voice, that precise tone she used when she was both kind and cruel at once. You should come by, General, we need to talk. It was never a request. It was a summons. Inside, the letter smelled faintly of her cologne, clean, professional, like someone trying to wash guilt away. The handwriting wasn't hers, but the signature at the bottom was. My stomach tightened as I read. Family meeting. Let's resolve this privately. 11 a.m. at the precinct. Resolve what, exactly? She didn't say. She never does. I stood in my kitchen, holding that letter like a verdict. I thought of the last time she said, privately. It ended with me in tears, her hand on my shoulder as she whispered, don't make a scene, General, you know how people talk. By 10:45, I was standing outside the precinct. The air conditioning units hummed overhead, a constant rattle that felt like judgment. I smoothed my blouse, walked in, and nodded at the front desk officer. He didn't nod back. His eyes skimmed me, then dropped to a clipboard. Name? Genevieve Devlin, I said. He flipped through the visitor list, then frowned. You're not on here. She invited me, I murmured. Chief Varnell. The words made him straighten, his posture changing the way men do when power shifts in the room. Right. Chief's sister. One moment. He handed me a temporary badge. My name was scribbled in black marker, misspelled, missing a letter. It shouldn't have mattered, but somehow it did. The hallway smelled of coffee burned hours ago. I walked past officers chatting about football and payday. Their voices dropped when I passed. I caught one phrase, family business, followed by laughter that wasn't cruel, just careless. That hurt more. Interrogation too, a woman said without looking at me. I hesitated, because of course that was where she wanted me, under the fluorescent buzz, under the one-way glass, sitting in the same chair where criminals waited. When I stepped inside, Isolde was already there. Perfect uniform, hair tucked, posture like marble. She looked up from a stack of papers. You made it, she said, as if I'd come late to brunch. What's this about? I asked. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. You always overreact. It's standard procedure. My pulse quickened. Procedure. Not conversation. Not sisterhood. Procedure. You sent a letter, I said slowly. Said it was a family matter. She folded her hands. And it is. We just need to clear a few details. Sit down. Every instinct screamed no. I stayed standing. Sit, Genevieve. The room tilted with the memory of childhood punishments, her voice calling me bossy, dramatic, too emotional. I sat, because I always did. An officer entered, dropped a clipboard in front of me. Just confirming your ID, ma'am, he said. I'm not here for questioning. Ma'am, he repeated, more firmly, we're confirming your ID. I glanced toward my sister, but she was staring at her phone, scrolling casually. My voice cracked. Isolde, tell him who I am. She didn't look up. He knows who you are. That's why he's confirming it. Something in me broke, quietly, like a bone you don't feel until you try to move. The officer extended his hand. Phone, bag, keys. No, I said. Ma'am, please. It's just for safety. I don't feel very safe, I whispered. He sighed, the way people sigh when they think they're dealing with a child. He took them anyway. I sat in the chair, palms flat on the cold metal table. The air smelled like ammonia and sweat. Through the glass wall, I could see officers chatting, laughing, glancing my way. Isolde stood and straightened her jacket. You'll thank me later, she said softly. For what? For helping you see how you come across. My throat closed. You mean like a criminal? She tilted her head, that same pitying gesture she'd used when we were young. "You're too sensitive, General, that's always been your problem." The officer who'd taken my things leaned in close enough that I could smell tobacco. "You should really comply," he murmured. "It'll be easier." "For who?" My voice came out hoarse. He didn't answer. I looked past him, through the glass. My sister was there, arms folded, watching. She didn't blink. She didn't flinch. She just stared until I looked away. My breath came shallow, steady. I remembered my 8th birthday, the way she'd blown out my candles for me, then hugged me like she'd done me a favor. The frosting on her lips, the applause from our parents. I had smiled too, because that's what little sisters do. I learned quietly, slowly, gently that in our family, winning always looked like caring. Now, as the metal cuffs clicked around my dignity, I finally saw what this was. She hadn't called me to reconcile. She'd called me to remind everyone which of us held the badge, the title, the room. The walls hummed. "Ze Estung." My name badge with the missing letter hung crooked against my chest. She didn't invite me to reconcile. She invited me to break. I didn't break, not yet. The metal chair beneath me squeaked each time I shifted. My wrists ached where the cuffs had bitten earlier. The door clicked shut, and I was alone again. The sound of the lock sliding into place felt deliberate, like punctuation at the end of a sentence I didn't write. Minutes passed. Or maybe an hour. A clipboard slid under the glass partition, pushed toward me by a young officer who didn't meet my eyes. "Review and sign," he said, voice flat. I pulled the board closer. My name. My address. My job. Below it, paragraphs of accusation, false complaints about a public disturbance at a city council meeting, the claim that I'd interfered with police operations. The details were too precise, too personal. Whoever wrote this knew me. The handwriting gave it away. Slanted S's. Curved R's. The way the loop in the letter G swirled like a signature flourish. My sister's style. She used to sign my permission slips for field trips. Now she was signing my disgrace. I whispered to no one, she used to write my name so I could go somewhere. Now she writes it so I can't leave. The young officer hesitated near the door, shifting on his feet. "Ma'am, do you need anything?" "A reason," I said softly. He didn't understand. He left before I could ask for water. The air smelled faintly of coffee and bleach. I looked through the glass again, and there she was, Isolde, speaking with another officer, her body angled perfectly toward the view window. Her gestures were calm, rehearsed. A woman born to play innocent in a room full of mirrors. She came in moments later, holding her own clipboard and a paper cup. "You look tired," she said, placing the coffee down. "You should drink something." "What is this?" I asked. "A misunderstanding," she said. "Paperwork. Routine. You always think everything's personal." "This is my handwriting, Isolde." She smiled, the corners of her mouth tight. "Do you see my signature?" It was a trick. She'd forged the content but not the name. Technical innocence. Moral rot. My silence told her I knew. It also told her I had no proof. She turned to leave, pausing at the door. "You never learned how to let things go, General, maybe this will help." When she was gone, I pressed my fingertips to the ink. The paper was still warm from her touch. A knock startled me. A different officer stood there, young, nervous, freckles fading under fluorescent light. "Ma'am, Captain Varnell wants me to escort you to another room." "Am I under arrest?" He blinked. "No, ma'am. Not officially." "Not officially. That's what people say before they hurt you politely." We walked through the hallway. The station buzzed with afternoon fatigue, telephones ringing, doors closing, keyboards clattering like rain. As we turned a corner, I saw it, the Hall of Honors. Rows of framed photos lined the wall. Each one glowed under a light fixture, faces frozen mid-smile. The smell of floor polish mingled with dust and old pride. "Wait," I said. My steps slowed. The young officer followed my gaze. There she was. Isolde again, younger, hair pulled back in a bun, uniform crisp. The caption read, "Captain Isolde Varnell leads heroic effort during Katrina." But it wasn't just her in the photo. Behind her, half-blurred, half-shadowed, was a woman carrying medical bags, shoes missing, hair soaked, me. My lungs locked. My ribs ached like they remembered the weight of those children I carried that day, barefoot, 12 blocks through the floodwater. No camera, no headline. Just bruises and fever and silence. I reached out before I could stop myself. The glass was cool beneath my fingertips. "Don't touch that," the officer said quietly. I pulled back. "I helped her that day," I said. "She couldn't even lift one of them." He looked uncomfortable. "It's not my business, ma'am." "It never is," I murmured. He led me on, but I looked over my shoulder once more. The reflection in the glass caught me, older, tired, uncredited. It hit me then how easy it was to erase someone without ever saying their name. Back in the room, the coffee had gone cold. Isolde returned, holding her own cup, fresh steam rising. "You always take things so personally," she said again, almost kindly. "That's why people stop listening." I studied her face. "You don't listen. You edit." She raised a brow. "Is that what we're calling accountability now?" Her words fell like ice chips. I thought of our father's funeral, how she'd spoken for both of us, how she'd said, "we," when she meant I. She rewrote even grief. I leaned back, steadying my breath. "You've been doing this for years, haven't you? Replacing my name with yours." Her smile widened. "Some of us move on, General. You stayed stuck in who you used to be." I felt the anger bloom slowly, almost gently. "You didn't move on," I said. "You just stepped over me." Her eyes flickered, the faintest sign that I'd struck something true. She stood. "We're done here." But I wasn't done. Not this time. When she left again, the door shut with that same practiced finality. I sat perfectly still, letting the silence settle around me. My reflection in the glass was faint, blurred by fingerprints. I whispered to that reflection, "They didn't forget me. They erased me." The room didn't answer. It didn't have to. The truth hummed louder than any denial could. I sat taller, not because I felt brave, but because I finally saw the pattern, the paper trails, the framed lies, the way she used kindness like camouflage. When the door opened again, she came in with another cup of coffee. "Here," she said, setting it down in front of me. "You look pale." I didn't touch it. "You should drink," she added, tone sweet as sugar. I looked at the steam curling upward and said softly, "You've had enough control for one day." Her jaw tightened. "Excuse me?" "You heard me." Something flickered behind her eyes, that old warning light. The one I used to obey. I didn't anymore. I folded my hands, steadying my voice. "This isn't about one document. It's about the decades you've been writing me out of." Her expression didn't change, but the coffee in her hand trembled slightly before she turned and walked away. The door clicked behind her, and I was left with the bitter smell of burnt coffee and victory that tasted like metal. I didn't know what she'd told the others, but it didn't matter. The silence she left behind carried the same weight as her voice, commanding, final. For a moment, I thought about walking out, just standing up and leaving this whole charade. But I knew better. Every corridor in this building belonged to her. I pressed my palms flat on the table. The chill of the surface grounded me, but the tremor in my fingers betrayed what I felt. Fear wasn't new. It just wore a different face every time she smiled. It pulled me backward in time. 5 years ago, the training academy gym smelled of sweat and varnish. We stood under buzzing lights, the air thick with competition and approval. I had voiced a concern during a debriefing, a rookie had gone too far during an arrest, a kid had left with a fractured wrist. I'd said it calmly, citing the code of conduct, but Isolde had heard it as betrayal. She turned to me, eyes sharp enough to cut through the applause. "You don't air our laundry in front of outsiders," she hissed. "It's not laundry, it's a problem," I had said. Her hand was on my shoulder before I realized it, then on my chest, shoving. My back hit the gym floor hard enough to knock the air out of me. Laughter scattered through the room, nervous, fleeting. No one stopped her. A security camera caught it all. I knew because I saw the red light blinking as I pulled myself up. But the footage disappeared before the end of the day. When I asked about it, the response was smooth, practiced, system glitch. That was when I learned, her violence was never impulsive. It was rehearsal. Now, in the same cold station, her hand was steadier than ever. I pushed back from the table, heading for the door. Enough of this performance. But the knob didn't turn. A moment later, it opened from the outside. She stood there with 2 officers flanking her. "Leaving already?" she asked, voice sweet as wrought. "This isn't legal," I said quietly. She shrugged. "Neither is ignoring a direct order. I'm not under arrest." Her lips curved. For your own safety, we're going to keep things orderly. The words were formal, but the pleasure behind them wasn't. She nodded to the men beside her. I felt the tug of rough hands on my wrists, the sharp snap of cold metal. Cameras turned subtly in the hallway. The scene played out under fluorescent light like a staged morality play. I could hear her behind me, tone smooth as butter. Security protocol, she told them. You can't be too careful these days. I met her eyes over my shoulder. You're enjoying this. Her smile was small, microscopic, but it glowed like a wound. The hallway opened into the main lobby, where chatter died mid-sentence. People looked up from desks, screens, vending machines. No one spoke. I felt the metal cuffs bite into my wrists again. I walked anyway, one step after another, refusing to bow. A small boy sitting near the waiting area stared at me. His mother pulled him closer, but he tugged free, curiosity winning. Are you a bad guy? He asked softly. His voice echoed longer than any order barked in that building. The woman apologized under her breath, flustered. Sorry, ma'am. I wanted to tell the child the truth. That good people sometimes get put in chains by the ones who can't stand their reflection. But the word stuck. I managed a small smile instead, one that hurt more than the cuffs. No, sweetheart, I said gently. I just asked the wrong questions. As the officer guided me forward, I felt the blood pulsing under the metal, thin streams warming my skin. I didn't flinch. This time, I let the sting in. Pain was the only honest thing left in the room. When they seated me for booking, I could feel my heart beating against the tightness of my chest. The air was heavy, dense with judgment and the smell of antiseptic. Face forward, someone said. The camera clicked. Flash. I didn't blink. The lens caught more than my face, it caught defiance. The faint red mark on my wrist. The steadiness of someone who had stopped asking for fairness and started preparing for war. I heard her voice again in my head, the one that always sounded like a judge disguised as family. This is what happens when you challenge authority. But over that, like an echo from another life, came my father's voice. I was 8, crying on the porch after falling from a tree. He knelt beside me, pressing a cold cloth to my arm. Bruises heal, honey. But being silenced? That sticks. He'd meant it as comfort, but it became a prophecy. The booking officer looked uneasy, as if sensing something he couldn't name. He cleared his throat. You can relax, ma'am. We're almost done. I'm fine, I said. My voice was calm, almost soft. Just make sure you get the picture right. He hesitated, then pressed the button again. Another flash. Somewhere deep inside, I felt something settle. Not peace, something colder. Certainty. If they wanted to make me into an image of guilt, I'd give them an image they could never erase. The cuffs scraped when they were removed, skin split just enough to sting. I rubbed my wrists, slow, deliberate. The young officer glanced at me nervously. You can go back to the room now. I nodded. My steps echoed down the corridor, steady, quiet. Every sound of my shoes on tile was a reminder that I was still here, still walking through the mess she'd made. When I passed by the reflection in the hallway mirror, I almost didn't recognize myself. My hair was a little out of place, my blouse wrinkled, my jaw tight. But my eyes, they looked like his. Like my father's when he knew something wasn't right but refused to back down. I stood there a second longer, studying the woman staring back at me. A woman they thought they could frame, flatten, rewrite. They were wrong. If they want a record of me, I whispered, I'll give them one they can't erase. I walked back down the corridor, my wrist still tingling where the cuffs had been. The building seemed to pulse with the hum of machines, printers, the low chatter of people pretending nothing was happening. I asked to use the restroom, voice steady, calm. The officer hesitated, then waved me down the hall. 2 minutes, he said. 2 minutes was enough. The hallway narrowed near the evidence storage. Pale walls, scuffed baseboards, the faint smell of floor cleaner. I paused there, just outside the door with the dented frame, and memory struck like heat. This was where it happened. 5 years ago, same hall, same light humming overhead. My elbow still ached when the weather changed, a ghost pain that never fully healed. I brushed my arm, tracing the invisible bruise as if to confirm I was still the same person who'd been shoved here once. Back then, she'd called it an accident. You were standing too close, General, you startled me. But her eyes had been sharp, her tone casual, and the smirk that followed said everything. I'd gone home that night and waited for the report to surface. It never did. The camera that blinked red that afternoon? Gone the next day. Another system glitch. Now the wall was bare. No camera. No record. Only me. I reached up, pressing my fingers against the same tile. It was cool to the touch, faintly slick with polish. I whispered, almost to the wall itself, if they won't record it I will. I glanced at the small black button beneath my jacket's lapel. The lens was barely visible, a pinhole shimmer catching the fluorescent light. It wasn't state-issued. It was mine. A keepsake from my father, modified for work he never got to finish. He'd always told me, you keep your own truth. Never rely on theirs. I learned quietly, slowly, gently in ways they never imagined. As I turned back toward the hall, something caught my eye, a door slightly ajar, brass letters reading Internal Affairs Review, Captain Access Only. I hesitated. My breath slowed. Inside, the faint glow of a monitor reflected off the glass pane. A folder sat open on a desk, stamped closed. The name printed in black, Officer Misconduct, Genevieve D. I moved closer. The page behind it showed the approval signature, Isolde Varnell. My sister's flourish. The loops of her handwriting mocked me through the glass. 5 years ago, after that shove, I'd filed my first and only internal complaint. I'd believed the system would correct itself. That was the last time I mistook silence for fairness. The same ache crawled up my spine now. The same cold realization. She hadn't just buried the complaint, she'd closed it herself. The date on the document mocked me, 1 day before my official submission. She had ended the investigation before it began. I stepped back, heart pounding quietly in my throat. The hallway's hum returned. Somewhere down the corridor, laughter spilled from the break room. They would never know what this door meant to me. But I did. When I walked back to the holding room, the air felt heavier, like the walls themselves had been listening. Isolde was there already, seated, legs crossed, her boots spotless. Coffee again, always coffee, her favorite prop. She didn't look up as I entered. You took your time, she said. I needed a moment, I replied. You've had years of moments, she said lightly, sipping. Still no gratitude. I stared at her, steady. You knew the file was fake. You wrote it. Her laugh was quiet, dismissive. The system needed a name. Yours fit. That report destroyed my record. She shrugged, as if that meant nothing. Paperwork doesn't destroy people, Genevieve. People destroy themselves. You closed the case before I even opened it. Her eyes flicked toward mine. Because that's what leadership does. Makes hard decisions. That's not leadership, I said softly. That's fear. Her tone sharpened. You wouldn't understand what it's like carrying this badge, being the example everyone points to. You'd rather cry about fairness than face reality. No, I said. I'd rather face it than rewrite it. For a moment, something in her faltered. Her jaw tightened, then released. You never could just drop it, could you? You never could stand the truth. The silence between us thickened, not empty but charged, like the second before a thunderclap. I let her fill it. I wanted her to. She stood, pacing slowly around the table, her heels clicking like a metronome. Do you know what it's like, being in charge of this place? Every mistake becomes yours. Every whisper lands on your desk. Sometimes you have to decide who burns and who gets saved. So you burned me, I said. If that's what it took, she answered, voice firm but quieter now. You were a liability. You questioned orders. And you broke laws, I said. She turned sharply, eyes flashing. Careful, Genevieve. I pressed my fingers lightly to the table, feeling the metal vibrate under her anger. Careful has never protected me before. Her lips parted to answer, but I didn't wait. My thumb brushed the small button under my lapel. The camera blinked red. I leaned back, watching her resume her seat, completely unaware. She thought she was controlling the story again, dictating it like an old script she'd written for both of us. Tell me something, I said, voice calm. When you forged my statement, when you signed my name, did you hesitate? She studied me, maybe confused by the sudden softness in my tone. No, she said. Not for a second. The red light on my jacket blinked again. 1, 2, 3 times. Her confession recorded in a quiet pulse. She didn't notice. She never noticed the details she thought she owned. I spoke gently now, almost tenderly, because it was easier that way. You think you're collecting confessions, I said, but you're giving one. Her eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? Before I could answer, a voice called from the hallway, Captain, you're needed in the conference room. She stood quickly, smoothing her jacket, regaining her composure. Duty calls, she said. I didn't look up. I didn't speak. My fingers brushed the metal bracelet around my wrist, feeling the faint ridges, the tiny compartment built into its clasp. It wasn't decoration. It was signal-ready, an old tool designed for moments exactly like this. As she walked out, I kept my gaze fixed on the empty chair she'd left behind. The coffee cup still steamed faintly, a perfect imprint of her lipstick along the rim. She built the cage, I whispered, voice steady. I just had to wait until she locked the door from the inside. The air in the room was still warm from where she'd sat, but colder somehow. Her scent lingered in the cushion, too faint to name, like old lavender or borrowed power. I traced the edge of the coffee cup she'd left behind with one finger, feeling the heat fade. Then I looked down at my bracelet, the one she never noticed, never cared to ask about. 3 taps. That was all it took. Once for history. Twice for truth. 3rd for justice. I pressed the sequence lightly, slowly. The movement was barely visible, buried beneath the angle of my elbow. The signal pulsed from my wrist like a heartbeat. It didn't make a sound. But I felt something shift. My father used to say justice isn't loud, it arrives like a tide. Quiet. Relentless. And this time, it wasn't coming for me. I let out a breath, steady and slow. This wasn't about rescue. Not anymore. This was about exposure. I wasn't the one in the cage. Not now. The door creaked open again. Rafe walked in with a clipboard clutched tight to his chest, like a shield. He looked tired, not from lack of sleep but from carrying something too long without a place to put it down. His eyes met mine and lingered. I'm supposed to get your fingerprints, he said. Are you? I asked. He didn't move. He just stood there, caught in something he hadn't been ready for. There's no reason for this, he said finally. There never was, I replied. He looked around, then stepped closer. His hand trembled slightly as he slid a post-it note across the table, tucked beneath the edge of the form. I looked down. The handwriting was messy but familiar. I've seen the footage. I believe you. I didn't lift my head, but I didn't need to. The shift had started. When Rafe left, the quiet settled differently. It wasn't silence, it was momentum. A blink of red on the inside of my bracelet told me the signal had been received. Active. They were watching now. Tracking. Documenting. I didn't smile, but I didn't scan for exits anymore either. I let the stillness wrap around me, not like a trap, but like armor. The bracelet hummed softly against my pulse, a reminder that I was no longer alone in this room, in this story. The door opened again. Isolde returned, without coffee this time. Just her, and the kind of smile people mistake for calm when it's really control. Rafe was gone. No one stood behind her. She closed the door herself, slowly, letting it click. You're very quiet today, she said. I've had practice, I replied. She sat across from me, folding her hands with the kind of grace only someone raised to perform could master. You know, I began, leaning forward, you used my past to destroy me. Her eyes stayed on mine, unmoved. And now, she asked. I'm using your present to end you. That one got a flicker. Barely a twitch. But enough. You think one signal changes everything? No, I said. But it wakes up the people who can. We both heard it then, phones ringing. Not one. Not two. Multiple. Voices in the hall. The rhythm of movement changing. Conversations paused. Her smirk faded, only a fraction. But I saw it. Her thumb twitched on the table. A crack. A clue. A heartbeat skipped. I leaned back. You've spent years writing the version of me you wanted people to remember, I said. But you forgot one thing. What's that? She asked, voice lower now. I never stopped recording. The noise outside grew, more ringing, more voices. She stood, pretending not to notice. But her hand brushed her jacket twice, nerves creeping in. I should check on the floor, she said. You do that, I answered. As she turned to leave, I saw it in her shoulders, the first sag, the tiniest one, like gravity was starting to remind her she was human. The door closed. And I waited. Not to escape. To finish. She doesn't know it yet, but the station's already been breached. The hallway outside buzzed faintly, an electrical hum that seemed to vibrate through the air like low static, the sound of something about to short-circuit. A kind of warning. A kind of truth. I stayed seated. Hands still. Eyes forward. My spine felt too straight for comfort, but I didn't let myself relax. Somewhere beyond the door, she was moving, probably pacing, probably rehearsing the next act of her carefully constructed performance. But this time, her math wouldn't add up. The rhythm of the building shifted, subtle but distinct. I felt it first, not through sound, but in my skin. A pressure drop. Like the breath of a storm gathering just out of sight. Then the overhead speakers crackled, the old static splitting like the air before lightning strikes. A voice filtered through, sharp and slightly too loud. "This is Captain Isolde Varnell," it began, crisp and confident, her tone as polished as glass. "I'd like to share a message with the department, a reminder of the challenges we face and the voices that threaten our unity." I didn't need to hear more. My stomach knew before my mind did. A second later, my own voice filled the lobby. But not my words. The recording was wrong from the first syllable, spliced, distorted, fractured. Lines from debriefs, briefings, interviews. Cut and rearranged. My sentences pulled apart like veins under a knife. "I don't trust this system. Corruption runs deeper than we see. They don't want truth, they want silence." My voice, but not my rhythm. My conviction, weaponized. The pitch was wrong, higher, desperate. The cadence jagged. Someone had twisted my speech until it sounded erratic. Emotional. They'd made me sound unhinged. And she was playing it through the building. Through the department halls. Through every speaker wired into this place. I didn't move. Didn't blink. My nails pressed deep into my palm, 5 half-moons digging into skin that had stopped caring about self-preservation. This was her last move. She wasn't trying to silence me this time. She was trying to make my voice unrecognizable. To turn it into noise. That's what silence costs, ownership. I stared down at the table as the distorted words looped again. They don't want truth, they want silence. The room beyond the door must have been shifting, murmurs rising, glances exchanged. Doubt moving like fog. The trick worked on some of them, I knew. Not because they believed her, but because it was easier than facing what she'd done. But the clip wasn't clever. It wasn't even careful. It was desperate. I closed my eyes. And somewhere inside that silence, I heard my father's voice. He came to me like he always did, quiet, unannounced. "Truth doesn't need to shout," he said once, kneeling beside me on the porch, his hands smelling faintly of sawdust. "It just needs to survive the noise." I had been 12 then, tears still fresh on my cheeks after being humiliated in front of my class for speaking too boldly. I thought I'd embarrassed him. I thought my voice had been too much. He didn't scold me. He smiled. He called it courage. Now, years later, in this building heavy with fluorescent lights and old dust, I felt that lesson pulse through me like a heartbeat. I reached to the underside of my wristwatch, feeling for the small notch at its back. My thumbnail slipped under the plate, and it popped free with a soft click. Beneath it, hidden in plain sight, was a microchip. It contained everything. The original recordings. The unedited files. My real words, my real tone, my real truth. I slid the chip into the narrow reader sewn discreetly into the lining of my waistband. A pulse vibrated once against my skin, a confirmation signal. Upload initiated. The files streamed to the secure cloud account I had built quietly over the past few months. Layered encryption. Duplicate backups. Redundant failsafes. It was my version of faith. The real story would live, no matter what they tried to do. I exhaled slowly through my nose. Controlled. Measured. The kind of breath you take when the world stops pretending to be fair. Then the door opened. Isolde stepped through. She looked as she always did, immaculate, immovable, armored. Shoulders squared, chin up, uniform pressed to precision. Her boots hit the floor in clean, hollow beats. The sound of authority trying too hard. Her eyes scanned the room once, sharp and deliberate, like a hawk surveying its prey. Then she walked past me without speaking, without glancing down, as though I were something beneath her notice. She was performing. Always performing. She thought she still owned the narrative. I waited until she reached the threshold again before I spoke. Funny, I said softly, almost conversationally. That clip still has your badge number in the background. She froze. The air thickened instantly, the silence drawn tight as piano wire. She turned, not all the way, just enough for her profile to catch the light. Her expression was neutral. Too neutral. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, her tone carefully even. I smiled faintly. You never do. And then, almost poetically, the phones began to ring. 1. Then 2. Then all at once. The sound echoed down the corridor, layered, mechanical, relentless. It wasn't normal office chatter. It was systemic. Urgent. The ripple spread. I could hear the low hum of voices rising, the shuffle of boots, the metallic click of doors opening. Someone outside called out, "It's a federal call, they're asking for the captain." I didn't move. I didn't need to. Isolde did. Her posture shifted, not dramatically, but enough for me to see the truth flicker through her mask. Her fingers flexed once at her sides. Her shoulders dropped half an inch. Her head turned, slowly, toward the sound of the phones. Like prey catching the scent of something too big to run from. Rafe appeared in the doorway. This time, he didn't hesitate. He didn't look uncertain or afraid. He just stood there, steady, silent, the kind of stillness that carries power without asking for it. He didn't need to speak. His presence said everything. The truth had found its witnesses. Isolde didn't argue. She didn't even try. She simply turned and slipped through the rear exit, her heels striking softer this time, her steps no longer in rhythm. I placed both palms flat on the table. My breath was even now. The storm had come and gone through this room, and I was still sitting here, unmoved, unbroken. I used to believe justice would speak when the time came. Today, I learned something else. Justice doesn't shout. It waits. It watches. And then it walks in. The system blinked, resetting itself, maybe. And I was still standing. The air in the corridor felt lighter now, charged but shifting. The calls had stopped, replaced by whispers behind doors and hurried footsteps. The system had blinked, and I was still standing, but standing alone didn't mean finished. I walked slowly toward the holding bench near the break room, each step carrying the quiet certainty that something irreversible had begun. My coat hung over the bench where I'd left it earlier. I reached for it out of habit, the kind of movement people make when they need something to hold on to. That's when I saw it. A small folded note, barely tucked beneath the sleeve. My name written on the front in blue pen, uneven, rushed. I unfolded it carefully, my breath catching halfway through the motion. I was forced to rewrite a report. I'm sorry. I couldn't stop her. E.H. Evelyn Hart. The handwriting trembled as though her guilt was still fresh. Evelyn had always been quiet, the kind of officer who made herself small to stay safe. She was there 5 years ago, when everything started. The one who avoided my eyes in the hallway, who nodded too fast when Isolde spoke. I held the note between my palms for a moment, the paper warming in my hands. The hum of vending machines filled the silence. There were other voices. Just buried deeper. Maybe I hadn't been the only one erased, just the one stubborn enough to keep showing up. I slipped the note into my pocket, smoothed my hair, and looked down the corridor again. The hall of commendation stretched ahead, rows of polished glass glowing under artificial light. I'd avoided it since that first walk with the escort. But something in me, maybe rage, maybe courage, drew me back. The first frames were the same, officers shaking hands, smiling for the cameras, pretending service was sainthood. Then I stopped. A new photograph had been added, glossy and bold. Isolde stood with the mayor, both beaming as they held a certificate between them. Behind them, the plaque read, Community Trust Award. The words made my stomach turn. But it wasn't the photo itself that stopped me, it was the reflection in the glass. If you looked close enough, past the glare of the flash, you could see me. Blurred, cropped at the edge. Holding the same document before she took it. I remembered that day, how she'd called me last minute to help finalize the files, then stepped into the photo before I'd even left the room. And now the evidence was hanging there, disguised as her triumph. My fingers curled into a fist, then released slowly, gently. I reminded myself to breathe. My pulse didn't need to race anymore. My proof no longer lived in anger, it lived in memory, in digital records she never thought I kept. I tapped my smartwatch awake. The screen lit up with the archive folder labeled 2018, Ceremony Files. I scrolled until I saw the full set of photographs, the raw images, before her edits, before her filters. My face clear, my hand clutching the award, her figure half turned toward the camera, unprepared. I attached the files to a message addressed to every media contact I'd saved under trustworthy. My thumb hovered for a moment above send. Then I pressed it. The upload bar crawled upward, slow and sure. It was time she saw what truth looked like when it didn't need her approval. I added one more recipient, internal affairs. A backup. Insurance. Justice likes copies. As the files left my watch, a faint click sounded behind me. She was there again, heels echoing against the floor. Her tone was clipped. You think a picture changes anything? I didn't turn immediately. I let the pause sting. Then I looked at her reflection in the frame instead of her face. It already has, I said softly. Check your inbox. She frowned. What did you do? I stopped waiting for permission. Her phone buzzed once. Then again. Then again. Ping. 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 I watched her eyes dart down, watched the color drain just slightly as reality crawled up her spine. Her posture cracked, the composure she'd polished for years faltering beneath the sound of incoming consequences. She whispered something I couldn't hear, maybe to herself. Then she turned on her heel and stormed toward her office, barking for someone to find the source. But the source was already everywhere. I leaned against the wall, hand still warm from the watch screen, heart steady. The officers nearby pretended to keep working, but their faces told the truth, uncertainty, disbelief, maybe even relief. Rafe appeared again, moving through the hallway like he finally belonged there. His steps were measured, his face composed but fierce in its calm. He stopped beside me, leaning just enough to speak under the hum of the lights. Federal liaison is on their way, he said quietly. You started something. I looked at him and shook my head. No. She did. I'm just the lens. He nodded, not arguing. His gaze drifted to the wall of photos, the glass, the faces behind them. You think they'll take it down? He asked. No, I said. They'll leave it up. People need to see what a lie looks like when it finally cracks. The air between us thickened, not heavy, but full. Like something had finally been released. Down the hall, a few officers whispered in clusters, screens lighting their faces as they read the forwarded emails, the leaked truth now spreading through every inbox. I pushed away from the wall, fingers brushing the cool glass of Isolde's frame one last time. My reflection looked back at me, tired but unbroken. And the station? I said softly, half to him, half to myself. It's finally seeing itself, without the filter. He smiled faintly. Guess mirrors don't lie. Not anymore, I replied. The light flickered above us, humming like a heartbeat steadying after a long sprint. I closed my eyes, taking one quiet breath before opening them again. Healing didn't arrive suddenly. It happened softly, step by step. The air changed first, not the temperature, not the light, but the feeling. Like standing in the eye of a storm and sensing the spin return to the wind. One moment, quiet. The next, every phone line lit up like Christmas in a power surge. Red, blinking, frantic. Dispatch scrambled. Officers leaned over desks. The front desk clerk picked up one line and immediately dropped it, face pale. The calls weren't local. Not anymore. Rafe looked across the floor toward me. I didn't nod. I didn't need to. We both knew what was happening. Still, I gave him one small tilt of my head, permission and promise, both. They were here. The heavy double doors slammed open, not with panic, but purpose. Military boots struck tile in measured, rehearsed rhythm. No shouting. No guns drawn. Just presence. Tension followed them like gravity. Leading the team was Colonel Lucien Keene, his face carved in ice, but not cruelty. Authority, earned, not stolen. His eyes scanned the room and settled on me. Where is Genevieve Devlin? I stepped forward, lifting my chin just enough. Right here. Behind me, I heard Isolde's voice, sharp, cutting. She's not authorized to. Keene raised a hand, and she froze like a dog trained by silence. Captain Varnell, he said without turning to her, stand down. Gasps weren't loud, but they rippled, like paper tearing in slow motion. Some officers blinked at her. Others blinked at me. But no one moved to stop them. Rafe walked calmly toward Keene. In his hand, a small USB drive. He held it out. "Everything she said is true," Rafe said. "And worse." Keane took it without a word, turning toward the makeshift tech table now being set up by one of his men. The screen flickered, then filled with images, security footage, audio playback, files stamped closed in bold red, all under one name, Isolde Varnell. Then came the part that even I hadn't seen yet, recordings from body cams, muted in official reports, now restored. Her voice giving orders, her signature on retracted complaints, her laughter during a disciplinary hearing. Officers around the room began to shift. Some looked away, shame etched in their silence. Others clenched their fists, not at me, but at what they had allowed to happen. Isolde's hand shot out toward my wrist, grabbing hard. "You think they'll protect you now?" she hissed under her breath. I pulled back, slow and firm. "No," I said. "But they'll protect what I protected." Keane's voice cut the room again. "Captain Varnell," he said, "you are under immediate internal investigation. Effective this moment, your command is suspended." She sputtered. "This is political." He didn't blink. "This is factual." A pair of military officers stepped forward. She hesitated, then saw no one standing to block them. Not Rafe. Not Evelyn. Not even the clerk who used to bring her coffee without asking. As she was led through the operations floor, her eyes scanned the room, perhaps looking for someone to defend her, maybe even pity her. No one did. Then came the click of cameras. Reporters. I hadn't seen them arrive, but they were here, outside the doors, now pouring in. Microphones raised. Phones angled high. The room brightened with flashes. One voice broke through. "General Devlin, is it true you were embedded undercover?" I didn't answer. I didn't even turn. Instead, I looked up, past the glass, past the eyes watching, toward the flag above the station. It waved slightly in the soft hum of the air vents. My hand moved to my bracelet, resting over the signal that started it all. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel triumph. I felt placed. Planted. Visible. They'll write headlines tomorrow. But tonight, I wrote my name back into the record. The courthouse smelled like old marble and filtered regret. A lingering mix of antiseptic and history. Not the warm kind. The kind that trails after you like a ghost and settles into your bones. The benches outside the hearing room were polished but unforgiving, solid oak with no cushioning, just a humbling reminder that justice was rarely comfortable. I sat alone, one hand resting limp on my lap, the other curled loosely around a disposable cup of lukewarm coffee I had no intention of drinking. A week had passed. Just 7 days since the last hearing, and yet everything felt different. The floor beneath me, once a battlefield of nerves and breath held too long, no longer felt like enemy territory. It didn't feel safe, exactly, but it didn't feel like it would swallow me whole anymore. Down the hallway, shadows moved and collapsed under the long line of skylights. The light above was too clean, too pale. It made the dust shimmer in a way that felt theatrical. One foot tapped lightly against the bench leg, not out of anxiety, but memory. Muscle memory. A boy's voice echoed in my thoughts, clear and unfiltered. "Are you a bad guy?" He'd asked me that in the lobby days ago, eyes wide, fingers sticky with something sweet. I had never answered him. Not because I didn't want to, but because the words hadn't formed in time. Now, with the silence pressing into my ribs and the questions louder than the footsteps around me, I felt the truth rise. I wasn't the bad guy. But I'd been the quiet one. And that silence had cost too much. The door creaked open. A junior clerk stepped out, clipboard in hand. "They're finishing deliberations," he said without looking up, his voice functional. Disposable. Like I was just another line item on the docket. I nodded, my eyes never leaving the glossy floor. The federal report had been released at dawn. Isolde's name was printed in bold. Dozens of pages. Dozens of voices. Women of color wrongfully profiled, detained, interrogated, and ignored. Patterns of misconduct so consistent they were no longer allegations, they were facts. Evidence buried, language fabricated, audits manipulated. Her signature sat at the bottom of too many falsified forms. Her choices rippled outward. But this wasn't about her anymore. Not just her. It was a system. A machinery of mirrors, once too slick to see through, now cracked open by light that refused to fade. And that morning, the mayor, our mayor, stepped to the podium and announced something more than remorse. Policy reform. Not lip service. Real teeth. Real ink on real paper. The kind that shifted culture, not just headlines. Each memorandum bore the same phrase. Pattern confirmed. Response initiated. Justice didn't always arrive in a blaze. Sometimes it uncoiled, slow, deliberate, like a rope unraveling after years of knots. I thought of Evelyn Hart. The quietest officer on the floor. The one who watched everything but rarely spoke. She had been reinstated this week. Her record was cleared. Her integrity restored. But she'd asked for a transfer anyway. I just need a department where silence isn't the only survival tactic, she told me when we last spoke. And Rafe, he'd been offered a position to lead the new internal ethics unit. He told me with his eyes lowered, his fingers tightening around the coffee cup like it was something fragile. You'll do good work, I said. His smile was small. But it reached the corners of his eyes. And you, he asked me. I shook my head, gently. I already did what I came to do. I wasn't there for a badge. I didn't want a new title, or a new place behind a new desk. My part had never been about power. It had been about weight. The weight of names that never made it into reports. The weight of breath held in interrogation rooms. The weight of being told to wait, to speak softly, to survive rather than live. The weight of erasure. And finally, the weight of saying, I was here. I mattered. And I'm not going quietly. I reached into my bag and closed my fingers around a sealed envelope I hadn't touched in years. It wasn't that I didn't know what it said. It was that I couldn't face what it didn't say. The last letter I ever wrote to my father. One I never mailed. I unfolded the paper. The creases had softened, worn smooth by time and regret. I read it softly under my breath, more breath than sound, but it still made something shift in my chest. They buried your name in silence. I carved it back out with my own hands. I'm not healed. But I'm not hiding. You taught me that truth doesn't knock, it waits for you to open the door. Today, I opened it. The hallway was still. No applause. No camera flashes. No headlines. Just the soft click of my voice stepping into its own room. Out the tall windows near the end of the corridor, I saw her. Isolde. Flanked by 2 federal agents, her wrists cuffed, her eyes cast down. There was no media coverage. No crowd. No applause. Just the quiet weight of consequence. She didn't look my way. I didn't wave. I didn't need her to see me. She would face what she created. Not by my hands, no, not anymore. But by the very system she once twisted to her will. That was her ending to write. Mine? Still being drafted. Later that day, I stood in front of the newly installed community board. A photograph had been added that morning. Mine. No filter. No edits. No soft blur to make me easier to look at. Just real. Me, looking directly at the lens. My name printed underneath. A caption etched in bold. Courage isn't volume. It's presence. The brass edges of the frame caught the sunlight. But I didn't step into the glow. I let it shine outward. Forward. Toward the next set of eyes that would stop here. The next person who needed to feel seen. Then a voice. Small. Curious. Honest. Is that you? A little girl asked. She wore oversized glasses. Frizzy ponytail. A pink notebook pressed to her chest like a secret. I looked down and smiled. Soft. Real. It was, I said. Her brow furrowed. What is it now? I turned back toward the glass. Took a breath deep and steady. Then I answered, clear and certain. Now it's all of us. Sometimes the loudest justice doesn't shout, it just refuses to disappear. How many names have we let fade because silence felt safer? If this story stirred something in you, share your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe more voices deserve to be heard, subscribe for the next story that dares to speak.